In today's video, we're looking at 10 of the craziest JRPG Easter eggs ever. Some you've probably heard of, some you probably haven't, and some you probably didn't even know were Easter eggs. And just as a warning, this will contain spoilers, so make sure to check the timestamps if you don't want certain games spoiled for you. To kick things off, let's start with our friends from Sega. So number 10, we're going to be looking at Judgement, the Yakuza spin-off where you play as a detective. Now there's really only one Easter egg I want to look at, and it's this one side quest where you're working with a group of thieves, and they only steal from the corrupt, rich. Does this sound familiar at all? Now the leader of these thieves is called Crow, and you're trying to find their member, Jester. Sounding familiar yet? Yes, this is an obvious Persona 5 reference. Now, it's not just surface level. There's actually a character that's impersonating the thieves, and he wears a mask that looks just like him, and this seems to be a hint at the character Mishima from Persona 5, and even the quest itself is called Underneath the Mask, an obvious reference to the song in the game, Beneath the Mask. Now, it's not so in your face where it's like, hey guys, this is a Persona 5 quest, but if you've played Persona 5, you'll get it right away. Considering that the Kingdom Hearts series is basically a Final Fantasy and Disney crossover franchise, there's tons of room for fun Easter eggs. First of all, in the very first Kingdom Hearts, at the Olympus Coliseum, whenever you win, Sora will do a victory pose similar to Final Fantasy characters like Cloud and Squall. Now here's a deep cut. Pence from Twilight Town wears a shirt that says Dog Street on it. Now this is a reference to the 2001 PS2 beat 'em up The Bouncer. Who remembers that game? Now what I really want to talk about is the secret ending. And it's maybe not an Easter egg, but I still really want to talk about it. Now at the time, this was absolutely mind-blowing. Essentially there's these three characters dressed in armor that all have keyblades, and they're in this big desert with all these keyblades everywhere. Now of course we didn't know what was going on at the time, we all thought it was Sora, Kairi, and Riku. But then at the end it says birth by sleep? We had no idea what that meant, and in fact we had to wait 4 years to really understand its true meaning, but at the time this was so cool, so mind-blowing, and it was really cool that it actually led to something years later. Now the Persona series loves to reference past games, make fun jokes, and hide Easter eggs. Of course, in Persona 5, there's quite a few right at the beginning. When you're walking through the train station, you can see idols from Persona 4 like Rise and Kanamine from the dancing game. And if you check the TV at the Café Leblon, you can see Naoto on TV being talked about. It's very obviously hinted at her, as well as other characters like Chie. Now the really cool ones are at the movie theater. They reference movies like The Dark Knight Rises with The Cake Knight Rises and The Good Father. And in fact, they continue this in Persona 5 Strikers. They mentioned that a movie is coming out called Dragon Like a Yakuza, obviously a reference to Yakuza Like a Dragon. But my personal favorite is when you go to the arcade and play the Crane game, it has the Juness music playing, and you know me, I'm a big Persona 4 fan, so to hear that Juness music one more time just put a big smile on my face. Now the first of many Final Fantasy entries on this list is Final Fantasy IV. This one is pretty well known but really cool, so I had to make sure I included it on this list. Now in the Dwarven Castle, there's a wall that you can walk through that seemingly leads to nowhere, but if you keep walking, it actually leads to the developer's room. Here you can talk to different staff members that originally developed the game, and with some of them you can even fight them. This little secret has been in nearly every version of Final Fantasy except the recent Pixel remaster. Now they said that the reason they didn't include it was because there was a lot of permissions and the original comments may have been in bad taste today, but overall this is still one of the coolest JRPG Easter eggs. The Paper Mario series is a super fun spin-off. It always is a little bit silly and tends to break the fourth wall. In Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, there's this little toad right here that mentions he's playing a GBA game, and if you keep talking to him, he says that he's been playing Fire Emblem and that it rocks his socks. Fun fact, Intelligent Systems that develops Fire Emblem also made Paper Mario. And in the original Paper Mario, there's a secret diary that Luigi's been writing in the basement of this house. Now he mentions that he's missed playing other games like tennis, golf, and having parties. Obvious references to Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, and Mario Party. But then in one of these chapters, he mentions that he wants to have his own adventure, and obviously this is a reference to the eventual Luigi's Mansion. Now it was actually in development at the time, but was not announced when this game came out, so looking back, it's a pretty fun little Easter egg to discover. Now the Final Fantasy VII Remake is full of Easter eggs. In fact, it probably could have been its own video. And in fact, there are so many, it's kind of hard to tell what's an Easter egg and what is just straight up fan service and callbacks to the original game. In fact, it all started with the announcement trailer. In this shot of the city, you can see Aya Brea, the protagonist of the Parasite Eve series. pretty cool. But my personal favorite is pretty early on in the game. When you first go to 7th Heaven for the first time and you start walking around, you'll see this little picture on the wall. Now, if you walk in and inspect it, it's actually a screenshot of 7th Heaven from the original Final Fantasy game. It's just straight up a picture from the old game. I absolutely love that, and I love that the developers of this game really pay homage to the original in so many fun ways. Atlus clearly loves dropping Easter eggs in their Persona games, as this is the second game from that series on this list. Now, one of my favorites is in Persona 4 when you go on a school trip to the school from Persona 3. In fact, one of the characters that you can romance in Persona 3, Chihiro, is your tour guide when you go there. But one of my personal favorites is from Persona 3 Portable. Now, when you're exploring the city, you can go to this club and you can talk to this guy. Now, it doesn't have a name for him, but when you look at it, it's clearly Vincent from Catherine. Now, on the original release of Persona 3 Portable, it was still 2 years out from the release of Catherine. So at the time, it was like, okay, why does this guy have a character portrait and they didn't have a name for him? It seemed totally random, but looking back, it's a really cool tease and Easter egg for the upcoming puzzle platformer from Atlus. Dragon Quest XI is an absolutely amazing JRPG that I believe needs no explanation, but has a secret ending that might. Now, if you get the true ending and stay past the credits, there's an extra scene that may not make sense if you're not a longtime Dragon Quest fan. First off, you can see the symbol on the book right here is the same as the luminary from the main character in the game. And actually, if you count all the books on this shelf, there's actually 11 in total. Next, the mom walks to wake up her son, and for those of you that aren't aware, this is a reference to Dragon Quest III, one of the more popular games in the franchise in Japan. Now, Dragon Quest XI was originally released in Japan in 2017, and people thought this might have been a tease for a Dragon Quest III remake. Well, many years went by and nothing came up. But then, this last year, we got the announcement of the HD 2D remake for Dragon Quest III. Seemed like Square was playing the long game with this one, but definitely a really cool Easter egg and a really cool secret for big Dragon Quest fans. Now, when you have a game with one of the most tortured development cycles like Final Fantasy 15, you're bound to see a lot of fan service to appease fans for the long wait. And trust me, Final Fantasy 15 has tons of fan service and Easter eggs. First of all, you can just straight up play songs from other Final Fantasy games while you're driving around in the regalia. A little bit of the fourth wall breaking, but cool nonetheless. Of course, you have Final Fantasy staples like chocobos, a guy named Cid. This time you have a female Cid called Cindy, and a Dragoon character with the last name Highwind. Now, as far as some fun Easter eggs go, there's this character here that's wearing a shirt that says Meteor on it, and if you inspect it closely, it's obviously a reference to the Final Fantasy VII logo. But I really want to talk about one of the more deeper cut Easter eggs. Now, Prompto is a character in the game that loves taking pictures, and you can do it in different spots all around the world. And at some point he says, "Say, fuzzy pickles!" And if you're not an old school JRPG player, this probably made no sense to you. However, this is a reference to the Super Nintendo game Earthbound. Now, throughout the game, a photographer will randomly show up to take your picture, and he says, "Say fuzzy pickles." A pretty cool deep cut Easter egg. If you're an old school JRPG fan like me, definitely a fun surprise to see. Now, Kingdom Hearts has already shown up on this list, but Kingdom Hearts 3 takes the cake, including one of my all-time favorite video game Easter eggs. Now, of course, there's some less than subtle ones, like when you go to the Toy Story world and you see an ad for Dissidia NT, straight up just a real game from Square Enix. Now, in the secret ending of Kingdom Hearts 3, Sora actually goes to the world ends with you world, or at least that seems to be what they're strongly hinting at. And Riku ends up going to the world of Verum Rex. Now, what's that, you might ask? Well, here's where things get really interesting. In the Toy Story world, there's a very high quality trailer that plays for a fake video game called Verum Rex. It seems so random, but the full context came later in the Remind DLC. Now, that DLC had its own secret ending. Here it shows a Verum Rex character named Yozora in a car. Now, this might look familiar to some, but let me blow your mind. Almost shot for shot, this same scene was from an early trailer from Final Fantasy Versus 13, aka Final Fantasy 15. Game director Tetsuya Nomura isn't even attempting to be subtle here. He was taken off Final Fantasy 15 and it was eventually handed to Hajime Tabata. I guess this is Nomura's way of saying, I want this world in my games and I'm not even going to be subtle about it. Pretty cool Easter egg, and I remember my jaw dropping when I saw this for the very first time. Now, to watch another cool JRPG video, click this one right here. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more great JRPG content all year long. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.